Have you seen some of those websites of advisors that like put up the phrase conflict-free advice? Oh, it is so cringe because it's like, no, this is impossible. Like, we are all people. We need to make money in order to take care of ourselves and our families. Like, we have a bias toward ourselves, even if we have to meet the fiduciary standard of always putting our clients' needs ahead of anything else.
Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now, your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Physician Sense Podcast. I am your co-host, Chad Chubb, with my favorite, best friend who just gave me lots of praise pre-meeting notes that I'm not going to tell anybody, but he has a big heart, and you already knew that, Tyler Olson.
It's good to talk to you again, Chad. I love talking about all things finance, and I'm psyched for question number 2 from Dr. W, right? That's what we're talking about today?
We are back with Dr. W. We lied to our audience last episode. We said we were going to get through 2 questions. You and I, in typical fashion, spent 45 minutes on 1 question. So here we are, pick it up on number 2. If for some reason you skipped the last episode, let me give you some notes here. Dr. W sent over a beautiful comment with 4 questions. Last week, 2 weeks ago, so last episode, I should say, we covered question number 1. We're going to start with number 2 today. We're going to hopefully get through more than 1, but we'll see. Here is question number 2, Tyler. And to paint a little picture for you, Dr. W, still in training, preparing to be a high-income attending physician, has his ducks in a row now, but kind of thinking, what's next, right? When do I know I have to take a leap to hire an advisor, or what values do they provide? That's what we're walking through in these 4 fantastic questions from Dr. W.
Before you throw out the question, even though this may not be the official title, I just want you all to know that in my mind, when I read these questions, my title of these questions and conversation that we're having is, I know how to invest in index funds. Why in the world would I need to hire a financial advisor? And we're telling you that there are many reasons, but there's a lot of people that think, they're like, why would I need to do that? And Dr. W is asking it genuinely, so he's not being snarky or anything, but it's our own industry's fault that we've created this concept that like our value lies in investment management. But anyway, that was the genesis of these questions, is trying to figure out like, why would I do this? What's the point of an advisor? And it's a very important question to ask.
Yeah. And again, our last episode, we thought we'd kind of get through at least 2 of them. In 1, we just kind of went down a rabbit hole, and there's layers to it. So question number 2 today. At what complexity later is, let me restart this one. And at what complexity later is reasonable to ever potentially transition from a fee-only to an AUM advisor? Interesting question, especially considering that you and I, Tyler, have the same fee structure. First thoughts when I read that out loud.
So this was different because when I get this type of question, the version I usually get is, when is it best to transition from AUM advisor to fee only?
That's what I thought too. Yeah, that's funny.
Because like, people are thinking like, well, how much am I paying my advisor? And they're like, if you're in any of the, physician finance blogs, there's a lot of people that they highlight the fact that maybe because of the percentages that are being charged against an investment account or many investment accounts, that you could be paying $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year for investment management only. And you don't even realize it if you haven't been told what the dollar amount is. And so I hear a lot of physicians. I've even had some, they say, we would like to hire you, but our AUM advisor is charging us less now. So we're just going to wait until our assets grow and then we'll switch. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that they realize that. I don't think that's cool personally. Like, cause I think that like it's a lot more complex than that. I get the idea of shopping around to be able to save money And if it's like, if it's a stark difference, I do get it. And if it's a stark difference in services provided, but like the way in which this question tends to go is, how do I get off of the escalator that is AUM and jump onto flat fee? In order to save money. To me, it is that other way around, to not go from fee only to AUM, whereas, to go to AUM to fee only if you're trying to save money, maybe. But really it just is coming down to like, well, what are the service model differences? What are you getting with your current advisor? And what would you be getting from the other advisor? Because again, I think they're associating, well, fee only advisors, they do financial planning. AUM advisors, they do investment management. What did you think?
Yeah, it's funny because we did not discuss this question pre-meeting. We actually just kind of read into this, and this is our first time discussing it together, I should say. I thought the same thing. Usually it's the exact opposite. Our most common client is usually an attending physician 10, 15 years in now, where they built up a lot of assets, and now they're doing the math on their AUM fee saying, that's expensive. And this is the other part that's very important. I don't know if I'm getting that amount to justify that fee. That is the most important part. Because when you first read the question, right, there's no complexity level that should ever say, like, I want an AUM or a flat fee advisor, right? Tyler and I are both flat fee guys. But there's never like, well, my friend over here does AUM. He's actually 10 times smarter than me, so you should switch over to him because he's smarter, right? That there's never a complexity level. Again, comparing apples to apples, if it's apples to oranges, there's always a reason to switch from one or the other. But I could not agree more that usually we'll see it the other way, Dr. W, where and Tyler, you said it as well. There's been some clients that come to us, they're like, I do like my advisor. I think they do pretty good work. They use AUM, but they only have $100,000 invested with. I said only $100,000. They're paying them, $1,000 a year for pretty good financial planning. You're like, yeah, we're a lot more expensive than that. And I think for where you are today in terms of complexity, you're getting a lot of value there. Can we do some more? Will we nerd out some more? Sure, but you're also going to pay, a multiple of that fee. And that's where I think you'll see it more commonly, that transition. But AUM can sometimes actually look a little bit more attractive depending on how many assets and depending on the services you're getting. If you're paying 1% for someone to use a model portfolio and sit down with you once per year to review this ugly statement, and they call that financial planning, even at 1% or whatever that fee is, you're still losing here. And we noted this in the last episode, right? You still want proactive planning. If not, you can still be getting hurt now because you're missing out on so many other parts of financial planning for that lower fee. And then, to defend the opposite side, you could also be paying a ton of money and not getting nearly enough value. So our industry is extremely easy to follow. You can tell by our conversations. It's easy. It makes sense. It's tough. But I think to the main question there, I don't think there's ever a complexity level. It's truly, here's what I'm paying. Here's the services that I get. I feel pretty good here. And to your point, Tyler, right? Switching to get the lower costs, if you're already in a good situation, you're just price shopping, not cool. I think if there's other reasons in there, then there's a reason for a switch. But yeah, when I first read it, I actually read it the opposite. I see it the other way. I've actually never, I'm sure it's happened, but I've never seen the other one play out where like you're in a flat fee, you finally build up all these assets. You're like, now I want to pay 1%. Now it feels like a good time to pay AUM.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because I think it goes to show how we all need to do a better job of not a better job, but just like what you and I do and others that we know, consistently communicating what you just said about what the fee is, what you're paying, what you're getting, its tangible value, its intangible value. Is it what you need? And then make a decision. But also, if there is, I guess, like from a long-term standpoint, I'm thinking about this question too, because like Dr. W, he's saying that, he's in training, he's investing on his own. Say, like in his mind, like at first he hires a flat fee advisor, but then things are going to get more complex, and so maybe he needs to switch it up, in like 15 years or something like that. I don't know if that's what he's thinking, but that's how I read it. And what I see is an opportunity to find somebody, regardless of their fee model, who really gets you who is an expert in what you need, and they rope in their network of professionals where they are not experts to surround you with the support that you need, and those needs will grow, they will change, and that you can see this person being able to adapt to those changes as you get older. That is the ideal situation. Those are the sort of big picture points you want to be able to discuss with the prospective advisor. If a person wanted to be able to ascertain the potential for that type of long-term relationship, what would you ask an advisor?
You mean in terms of like fee structure?
Sure, like their fee structure, like how it relates to the services that they provide that would allow them to remain adaptable. Like if you're like a hypothetical consumer
Yeah.
and you're concerned about the fee structure, and so you want to ask about that, but you also want to ascertain, does that fee model matter in order to have confidence in a long-term relationship?
Hmm. I would bring it back to, if I'm the consumer, the two things that come to my mind if I'm shopping for advisors is, and this is where some like financial planning is intangible. Like there are some times you're going to say like, hey, here's your tax savings. To me, knowing what my fee structure looks like going forward, because again, flat fees do increase. Like we use a tier model, so you could start here, but as things go up, it could go up to here. AUM, usually AUM and defensive AUM too, right? You could start off at 1% as your fees go up, those numbers come down. So me knowing what I'm paying not only now, but likely going forward, and then in that given year, every single year after that, right? I'm evaluating, is it worth the bang for the buck? I do think it is extremely difficult, at least I would struggle with this, going to interview 3 advisors, looking at their fees and saying, which one do I think I'm going to get the most value out of in the long run? I think that's a really hard one to comprehend. At least my brain can't comprehend that. And that's where, we'll usually tell our clients, like, year after year, we have to earn your business. So if I'm sitting there as a consumer, year after year, and some years the other joke I always make is some years you're going to overpay us, some years you're going to underpay us, right? Some years have all these moving parts, some years are boring. So for me, it would be hard for me to look that far out in terms of like value add, but year in, year out, I paid X. Was it worth it? Right. That's what I'd be looking for.
That's good. You want to keep it simple. So yeah, great question. I don't have any other notes on this one.
Yeah. I think it was, again, short, sweet, but it had some to it. All right, good. Let's do number 3 now. So
All right.
number 3 from Dr. W was things to look for in a finance professional. How to know if you need an advisor versus a planner. How important designations are when you first starting looking for them. I'm kind of paraphrasing here because I'm fumbling through this. WCI has discussed it over the years, but I would greatly appreciate any insight from your camp as well. Fiduciaries, payment methods, disclosures are definitely important, but are there other distinctions or distinguishing factors to consider? There's quite a few items in there. What pops off most to you?
So expertise, like what I think is the primary question here is, what are the varying capabilities of financial professionals, both in proven education and experience? Because the question of advisor versus planner, that's another fault of our industry that we have not communicated well, because like an advisor versus a planner it can be exactly the same thing, or it can be wildly different.
Yep.
And I know that sounds weird the way I just said that, but what I mean is that you could have one person say, I'm an advisor, and another person say, yeah, I'm an advisor too, and they offer very different services.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could have a person who says, I'm an advisor, and then sometimes other days they say, I'm a planner. Like I do that.
Our website uses both words. I actually use both words because so many people don't know which word to search. We do it for SEO. I use advisor in some spots and planner in other. That's how nerdy it gets from our side, guys. So now you see what we're dealing with. People just make up words and then we have to roll with it. So I couldn't agree more. I think those are interchangeable, and it has no effect on probably who you're hiring, because even the bad people will still call themselves a planner or an advisor. So again, you're kind of trapped there.
Yeah. I think designations play a pretty important role And when we say designations, the primary ones that you want to look for are going to be CFP, Certified Financial Planner. I mean, CFA is out there, but I don't know if that would be one that, I mean, CFA is like, those are folks who are really experts in like the minutia of investment management and like economics. And
Very hard test. To me, I always think CFA, there's not many CFAs wanting to do financial planning, right? Most CFAs are likely part of like, they work at Vanguard and they build portfolios. But in defense of CFAs, very smart group of individuals. I personally don't think you're going to bump into too many of them. And if you do, they're likely a little bit more leaning towards like the investment side, maybe more than the planning side. That's kind of a broad statement. But to your point, Tyler, I think you just don't see those a ton because they're usually like very heavy on like building a portfolio per se for institutions, not, Dr. Smith.
right. So you've got CFP. I mean, I think the relevant ones, we could skip CFA, CFP, and CSLP, Certified Student Loan Planner.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the, this one, I don't know how relevant or how what you think, but I think like the what is it, RICP?
Yeah, retirement income something professional, right?
Yeah.
And the other, I mean, you didn't give yourself enough credit too. I think EA is a really important one. The enrolled agent on the tax side of things. So that's one that I also like to see in there. I was kind of always say CPA/EA. Like I think those are in the same ballpark from my side of it. But as the physician consumer here, might not know that.
Yeah, it'd be good to touch on that for a minute.
Yeah.
So CPA and EA, they both have educational requirements. The CPA has more educational requirements and a higher level of continuing education. But in a lot of areas that are not necessarily relevant to the typical consumer. So I think that most physician consumers would be able to equate them in terms of capability of helping them with tax planning and advice, an EA versus a CPA. You will get a lot of, and I mean, if any CPAs listen to this episode who disagree with me, they probably feel very strongly that they disagree with me because there are sometimes some arguments about that online. But I stand by it. I think that an EA can stand up to a CPA in terms of being able to effectively represent a client and give them advice on taxes. I've had some people say, I'm not a CFP and you are. And I've had people ask me like, why aren't you a CFP? And the mode in my life when I was like in like college mode, that would have been the time for me to do it. And that was like in like 2003, 2004, 2005 timeframe. And I just was busy with other stuff and I didn't prioritize it. I mean, it would have been cool if I had done it. It would have been nice, but I've thought about going back to get it now. I've looked at the curriculum and everything and I'm just like, nah, because like you can exchange, I think, and this is obviously I'm biased. Let me know what you think. You can exchange a substantive amount of experience with the designation, but the consumer won't know that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really great if you work with someone who's a CFP because you can kind of like prove to yourself as a consumer that you've like picked someone that's an expert.
I think the CFP is always like a good one of the first things you look for, but it's still not like guaranteed you're getting a great financial planner, right? There's CFPs that all they do is sling whole life insurance all day, right? So that's where it's really important. And to your point too, Tyler, right? I am very confident. I wish we could, maybe someone from the CFP board will contact us and give us a chance. I'm very confident that if I sat you down for the CFP exam based on everything you know, without any type of studying, because again, you've been doing this for a very long time, I'm very confident you would actually pass the CFP. Like, no studying, just like I get to take you out of this podcast right now, sit you down, and you just take the exam straight up. I'm very confident that you still pass that because you have so many years of experience. And to your point, right, when you leave that study mode and then you plug in family and then kids, you're just like, huh. I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think CFP is important. I think it's an important one for a lot of people as like their first start, I think one of the best things about individuals that don't have the CFP like yourself is you show your knowledge every day, whether it's through the podcast, whether it's through Twitter, whether it's, a conversation with you. And that's important. So people that don't have that context, right? They don't have a Tyler Olson out there. The CFP, I think, would be a good starting point to kind of like lower your options. But as I noted at the start, there are still bad people that have a CFP designation that sling products. And that's where it's, again, our industry is just not easy. If you take away one thing from this series of episodes, it's not easy to find the perfect match.
Yeah. I do think that it's good that if you're going to work with a young person, with a young advisor, that they should have a CFP. And I know that like as a young advisor, when I was like in my early 20s, that I know that I came across prospective clients who just they could tell they're like, well, he's young, he doesn't have much experience, and like he's not a CFP. Now, that was never communicated to me. I can just imagine as like a consumer who's like concerned about being able to make sure that they're like being advocated for by an expert. I think like there are some great young advisors coming up in the industry, but the CFP is really important for the foundation if they're at that point. So I do think that that's relevant. And but like the other one, CSLP, do you feel like that, like in your own usage of it and like experience and like the education that you had to go through, has that been like a big like has that been a good boost that you think is worth consumers looking into?
Yes and no. I I took the CSLP very early on, like essentially very early on when it became a designation. And that's because a few of the people that I trusted in student loan advice essentially came in to, I think it's CLA is the actual institution that created the CSLP. I could be wrong with those letters, but again, alphabet soup. So that's when I got into it. For me, I already had good student loan knowledge going into it. Did I still learn some unique things? I certainly did. Again, going back to the younger advisor or an advisor that has no idea what student loans are, very important designation. If I'm sitting here as a physician trying to find my next financial advisor, would I only search for a CSLP? I likely wouldn't. I'd like to see it probably piggybacked on something else, right? It's a good thing to have. I wouldn't go out of my way to only find a CSLP. Because again, that's such a very because that's the downfall of the CFP, right? The CFP, there's no student loan advice. We don't learn anything about student loans. So that's the one good thing about the CSLP. So that's where there's pros and cons to it, but it's very hyper focused on student loans only. I mean that's all it is. I guess you get a little bit of tax in there because you got to talk about married filing jointly, married filing separately. But for the most part, it's only taxes. So I think it's a good one to have. I would not have it on my like must have list per se.
Mm-hmm. I had a couple other items outside of the realm of designations that I think are important to look for. The first of two things is that you can sense in your conversations that the advisor is spinning their thoughts and their conversation and their like next steps totally around your problems. Like there is no solution formulated yet. It's just we need to get our arms around you and like your problems because that's we are completely unable to do our job if we don't know that thoroughly. And so you want to look for those traits in a person, and you could tell by like what they talk about. If they're talking about their solutions a lot and they're not talking about your problems, that's an issue. Whereas on the other hand, if they just keep going back to like, what are you trying to figure out? What are the priorities? What are your time sensitive things that you're trying to sort out? If those sort of things are being talked about, then that's a really good sign. And then the second thing was one that you mentioned earlier, and that is responsiveness. Because like things like that's a major enemy in my mind of effective financial planning is that it just doesn't get done. So I'd look for those things too. Do you all have like a turnaround time where you're like, we've got to have a response by this time?
We would say less than 24 hours. So like if you email one of our team members at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, you should have a very good response before Wednesday at 9 a.m. Now, like the one I always will, I am still guilty of getting a little bit of work done on weekends. I try to preach to my team not to do that. So, like, if you send us an email on Friday at 5 o'clock, you're probably not going to hear. Most likely, you won't hear back until Monday. Now, if it's something pressing and I see it, like again, I usually I'm very efficient when my kids nap. When my kids are napping, I try to come in here, maybe get a few things done quick. But for us, we're like 24 hours. And if you don't hear from us in 24 hours and it wasn't over a weekend or holiday, kind of put it out an SOS because something probably happened. You in that
Yeah.
same ballpark?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't have like you have multiple employees. I have one.
Yeah.
And so, between he and I, we're always tweaking, but I have in my mind, I have a 48-hour turnaround. But see, you bring that energy. I'm going to step up now and be like, Chad, he gets back to everybody in 24 hours. I can do that too.
Yes, yesterday my son had his school golf tournament. So like I didn't put out I don't put out of offices on if I know I'm gonna get back to you soon. But like this morning I got in there and there was like some right around like 9:45. I'm like, oh sugar. So I'm like trying to get out good responses. So we try to follow that pretty long. And maybe there was a few that was like 26 hours. But I want to read this to you. So this is from Dr. Dolly. White Coat Investor says the post is called The Perfect Financial Advisor. I'm going to read these to you. This is Jim's, Dr. Dolly's perfect advisor. There are 8 things. Ready? Here we go. Okay. First one, fiduciary duty. Number 2, an up-to-date academic understanding of the field. 3, a meaningful designation. We discussed. Number 4, clientele just like me. 5, a reasonable investing strategy. 6, unbiased. 7, fairly priced. 8, tied in with other services. I really like this list. I think there's things that you can kind of add context to. I'm just going to make one joke first, and then I'm going to let you get your thoughts. I don't know how you feel about fiduciary duty, but I've actually taken the exact opposite stance now. If you tell someone that you're fiduciary numerous times, I'm actually convinced that you're a bad person now. I feel like that word is so overdone that I'm convinced that the only people that say I'm a fiduciary are actually like someone evil in disguise. Fiduciary is a very important word, but you shouldn't have someone yelling from the rooftops about that. Like that shouldn't be the sales pitch.
Uh-huh.
And I am still shocked, even like the amount of advisor websites, fiduciary. And I think, again, we have fiduciary on our website somewhere. I know we plug it into SEO because it is an important buzzword. But the amount of times I see or hear this word now, and then I do a little bit of research, I'm like, oh, that's why they said it 72 times, because they're concerned that you're going to actually find out they're actually just selling products behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Again, just my little caveat there. But when I first read that list, I was like, oh my God, if I hear the word fiduciary one more time. And it's just one that it is really important and they should be a fiduciary. But if they're continually saying it to your face, I have actually started to put up a yellow flag as opposed to a green flag. That's it. I digress. What do you think about the list? Is that your perfect financial advisor, Tyler?
I mean, I think that it's a good baseline. I mean, anything that I have to say about it, which I'll share in a second, is going to be, I think you could say, is nitpicking. I mean, yeah, they should be a fiduciary. They should be up to date on their academic understanding. There is a minor amount of continuing education required of fiduciaries that are not CFPs. There are more substantial continuing education requirements for CFPs and EAs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like one reason why designations matter.
Yeah.
Clientele like me, I think that's really important. When you feel like you're working in a system and in a realm that already has a baseline understanding of a lot of the challenges that you face, that's really beneficial. You don't have to work so hard to like inform the advisor on what sort of things you're dealing with, because that's tiresome. That is emotionally costly. A reasonable investing strategy, sure. Like, I don't know what that means, but like reasonable investment strategy is like, you mean like they're not buying like 35 mutual funds?
Yeah.
You know, That's what that sounds to me like, and that's good.
He noted like low cost ETFs, DFA funds. I think if you could probably sum it up, probably come back to like modern portfolio theory. Again, think like bogle heads is usually how Dr. Dolly leans on a lot of these things. But yeah, you nailed it there.
The one thing that I don't like is unbiased, because that is impossible. I think that there are variations of bias. So there are obviously like, if like one is like, if one is just selling life insurance, they're not really an advisor, they're a salesperson, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what he's talking about when he wrote that. But have you seen some of those websites of advisors that like put up the phrase conflict free advice?
Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
I want to like throw up like so badly when I see that. I'm like, it is so cringe, because it's like, no, this is impossible. Like, we are all people who need money. We need to make money in order to take care of ourselves and our families. So, like, we have a bias toward ourselves, even if we have to meet the fiduciary standard of always putting our clients' needs ahead of anything else. Like, yeah, like we have to be able to put that into a box, but and so we have systems in place to make sure that like on a stressful day that we're not going to do something foolish or something that would harm our clients. Like, you have a baseline moral code that we live by, or we should, but like we're not unbiased. I don't like how that comes across, because it creates the concept of perfection, and that does not exist. I don't like perpetuating that.
Yeah. And he kind of went on his note here on like commission based. And yeah, again, you covered it really well there. Like even us as flat fee advisors, like there's still biased advice in there. There's still conflict in there, right? If we're charging you $8,000 per year, but you never hear from us in that given year, that was a huge conflict. And you could say, again, we've already said this, but that's why I always say I'm never like, I love AUM, I love flat fee. Like, you can make a case in a lot of different ways, but it's just understanding what you're paying and what you're getting. Everyone has a conflict, just like you as a physician. Everyone has a conflict. It's just how you describe it, how you disclose it. That is the key, right? That's the key to one, trust out of the gate from our side of it, like advisor physician, but two, a long lasting relationship. So I agree that I see where Jim is coming from in this one, from the physician side. I hope I'd always find an advisor similar to how you just worded it, Tyler, in terms of like, not perfect. There are conflicts. Here's what they are. I am biased. I do make money because I also want to provide for my family. I also believe in work-life balance. Same thing I'm trying to preach to you all. Like, there's always going to be those things in there. It's just, do they actually discuss them with you? Do they disclose them to you? Can you have an open conversation about them? So, I agree. You nailed it there.
It's a good list. But I'm definitely going to be promoting your list, which is the more times they say fiduciary, the more likely they're scum.
When you said I hate seeing conflict free on the website, I was going to do. They probably had fiduciary 6 times before they listed that too. So we're probably on the same site at this point. Yeah, fairly priced they had on there, and then the last one was 8 tied with other services, which you said this beautifully. I believe this was our last episode on the same topic with Dr. W. Was having that deeper bench, knowing that, hey, we can't sell products, but hey, here's really good insurance brokers that we know and trust. You don't want me to review your contract, right? I can look at it in terms of like, hey, that's a great 401k plan, but I don't know the legal definition, right? You need to know every part of that non-compete, and this attorney is the guy or gal that's going to help you with that. We don't sell physician mortgages. Here's some really good mortgage, but like, we could go on for days, but that is, even to the question on like working with people like me, like that's the beauty of niching in our world, saying like, hey, we know what physicians need. And if we can't provide it for you, we already have this deep bench. And that is really important. And I think there's a lot of people that want to work with physicians because they know where you are today and what your income potential is. But it's not because they know and love working with physicians. Like, it seems simple, but dramatically different outcomes there in terms of your needs long term. So, good list. I figured that was a good one because things you're looking for in a finance professional. I figured that was a good way to bring in one of the main voices of the physician community, let 2 financial advisors kind of talk through it as well. The fourth question from Dr. W is actually about REITs. So I don't think we have to dig into that one because that one's also very more specific. I'm actually going to send a separate email to Dr. W, one for these great questions, but I'll put a little note in there for him as well. But anything you want to end with on hiring the perfect match for you?
Just that it's really good that any of you who are either in training, just ending, or you've gotten out recently, if you're thinking about these sort of things, you're taking the right steps. It might feel like it's overwhelming, because it is. It's a big deal to figure out who to trust with your money decisions. But like the fact that you are taking the time to ponder on it, you should be proud of that. And that is going to help you to take some wise steps. So listen to the previous episode if you didn't, and then this one too. If obviously if you're listening to this right now, you listened to it, duh. But make sure you go back and listen to the other one if you didn't get to yet, because I think that I could say that it's going to give you a lot of things to fill in the gaps of those questions about who to trust and why. So be proud of what you've done so far and just take it slow. There's no need to rush this decision.
Beautifully said. Yeah, take your time on it. If you spend the proper amount of time on it your first time, in an ideal world, you likely will never have to do this again for the rest of your life, which is kind of a powerful statement. And that's where it's important to interview a few advisors, understand fees, spend the time now to get it right so that you never have to worry about this again. And another thing that you don't think about as the end consumer, what you're going to go through with your financial advisor at the start, I always call it financially undressing, is deeply emotional and something that you don't want to have to do more than once. So get it right the first time, because you don't want to have to do this time after time after time to provide your next advisor all those details, because it's emotional. It's deep stuff. I would say it's more personal than it is finance when you use the term personal finance. So take your time on this, get it right. Again, one of those topics too, if you ever have questions for us, send them over. If you ever want us to analyze something in terms of questions, this is a topic that Tyler and I love. If you're looking for a good advisor, Tyler also always sends a good unbiased list that usually includes none of us, because we don't want to be on that list. We want you to find other great advisors as well. And there's a lot of them out there. So if you have questions, Tyler's always done a really good job too, kind of keeping a list of true trusted financial planners out there. So Dr. W, thank you. Fantastic. Tyler, you got anything else to add there before we close up?
Yeah. Actually, on that note, if you look under my profile and you go to lists, I have a list that's labeled personal. It's personal fin resources. It's personal finance resources. There are a lot of great advisors in that list. It's a list of other accounts and people that I know personally. That's a great place to start if you're looking for something to go off of. So I just want to mention that.
Perfect. Yeah, love that. Again, thank you, Dr. W. Again, anyone, this is a perfect example. Send those questions. We have the link right on our website. You can submit those questions. We'll always keep it anonymous. That's why we're using Dr. W. That is not the full name, because we're smart. We don't do that to you, but send over questions. We'd love to build more shows around it. Tyler, as always, a fun one. 2 great episodes from Dr. W. So this is fantastic. I'll catch you on the next one, my friend.
Sounds good. Have a great night.
See you, Tyler.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Heals Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state-registered investment advisor.